Coming up is one of the most epic woodworking transformations you'll ever see. We're going to take an old, rotten root and transform it into something special. The Goblet of Fire from Harry Potter. In its honor, we 3D printed the original Goblet of Fire as a foundation for us to recreate the piece in its exact form. First, we found a tree root we thought would be suitable to craft our goblet from. Then, we shoveled the mud from around it so we could assess how big it was. Luckily, it looked like the dimensions of the timber were perfect for us to begin its radical transformation. So, by using both a saw and an axe, we cut off the thickest branches before utilizing our crowbar to dislodge the root and pull it out from the ground. But this was only the very beginning. Keep watching to see exactly how this humble root was transformed into the almighty Goblet of Fire. Whenever we begin the crafting process, it's important to work from a clean surface. Now the workspace is clean, we can tend to the wood. As you can see, the timber is gnarly and needs to be prepared for the lathe. So, using an awl and a screwdriver, we begin to remove soil from the crevices of the root. This is vitally important because later we'll be coating the timber with epoxy resin to give it a brilliant shine. Any moisture from leftover dirt would interfere with the bonding properties of the resin and ruin the craft. Once the dimensions of the timber are assessed in relation to the goblet, it needs to be cut to size. To do this, we fix the timber in place by drilling screws into the base. Now, it won't move during the cutting process. Using an underneath Japanese pull saw, the branching roots are taken off. The jigsaw is able to quickly remove any thicker pieces that would otherwise be too time-consuming for the pull saw. We don't throw these branches away, though. They still have an important role to play in the creation of our goblet, but not just yet. For now, we secure the timber into a bench vise. Then, the jigsaw is used to shape the largest areas of the timber into a flat surface, ensuring it fits uniformly when it's time to cast with resin. Now the timber has been modified, the dimensions must once again be assessed. These measurements are also crucial for creating the box that will be used as the mold for the epoxy resin. With a selection of wire brushes, all remaining dust and dirt on the surface of the timber is swept aside. Now the root has been prepared, we need to assemble a box to cast the resin. Once cut, each pane is sanded down to ensure all remnants of dust are removed. Accuracy is everything. It is vital that every pane of the box is sized perfectly. Next, non-adhesive tape is applied to the timber to ensure the epoxy resin doesn't stick to the sides. This allows us to easily separate the mold from the box once the resin has set. If there are any gaps in the box, the resin will seep out and it's game over. So, each edge is glued tightly together to ensure nothing can get in or out. The box is complete, so now we must place the wood inside. However, we must be careful not to place the pith in the center of the goblet. The pith is the area in the center of a log which is surrounded by unstable wood that's prone to deteriorating or breaking apart. We carefully arrange the wood to avoid the center of the root appearing in areas that will be carved. Voila! We're now ready to add the resin. The volume of epoxy resin needed to fill the container can be measured with rice. By pouring it in and giving it a good shake, we ensure all the nooks and crannies are filled. Now, by emptying the rice into a mixing bucket, we can weigh it and find out exactly how much epoxy resin we need to fill the same amount of space. Let's begin to prepare the epoxy resin. We're using a UV Epoxy kit with parts A and B to be combined in equal measure. Let's pour it all in. After pouring, the mixture will contain lots of air bubbles. These are bad, as they create empty pockets in the resin which would reduce the structural integrity of the goblet. So, after attaching a mixing paddle to our drill, we stir the mixture thoroughly to remove as many air bubbles as possible. To create that all-important fiery glow, we'll add some neon red metallic mica to our mixture. Once again, we use our mixing paddle drill to bind all the properties together. When dealing with this quantity of epoxy resin, we'll be pouring it into the container in 2 different stages. This is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, there are bound to be some leftover air bubbles. These will naturally rise to the top and escape, but only if there's a small enough quantity of resin to escape from. Secondly, the mixture can also heat up in intrusive ways if we pour too much at once, leading to shrinking, cracking, and sometimes even smoking. We leave the first layer to set overnight, then add the second layer a few days later. Once set, let's remove the goblet from its mold. First, we unscrew the side panels. Then, we hammer each side to dismantle the box. Currently, this cuboid is too large to begin turning on the lathe, so using a bandsaw, we'll cut away the excess sides to reduce its size. By creating a wooden base to secure the piece onto, we ensure we have resin throughout the entire goblet. Now, let's spread epoxy glue on here on the surface of the resin. Next, we mount the timber to keep it secure once it's on the lathe. Before starting the lathe, we'll rotate the workpiece by hand to make sure it doesn't hit the tool rest. Another precaution to take is ensuring the speed of the lathe is not too fast. Using the correct lathe speed will allow the blanks to be turned with little or no vibration, allowing the tools to produce a clean surface. Now, it's the moment we've all been waiting for. Let's sharpen our tools and begin turning the piece. Once squared and clean, a hole can be drilled in the cup end and the hollowing process begun. It's important to remember to withdraw the tool frequently and clear the shavings to prevent binding and excessive heat. With a curved edge scraper, we then use a combination of the spindle gouge and ring tool to begin expanding the hole from the center, one layer at a time. Now the shape is formed, light shear scraping cuts will improve the surface prior to sanding. We'll be sanding at 120 grit to ensure all tool marks are removed before progressing to the next grit. Finally, we'll add some finishing oil across the surface to give it that polished look. So, we now have a goblet. But we're not done yet. It still needs some all-important final touches before we can say it's the Goblet of Fire. So, we'll carve the magnificent doors of Hogwarts into the intersection between the cup and the base of the goblet. Only then will we have fully recreated the goblet in its exact form. Let's begin by measuring the section we're going to carve with dividers. Then, we'll use a pencil to mark where we will be making the cuts. This outline will give us the foundations to carve to the perfect dimensions. Now, with a flat number 2 carving chisel, we'll rough out the planes of the hexagons. By doing this, you'll see we are beginning to form the outer shape already. Throughout this process, we will use a combination of a flat chisel to carve it in from 2 sides and a thinner chisel for those finer details. Once the planes are carved out, we draw the tracery windows and begin to remove the excess material with a gouge. Extra care must be taken when carving directly into the sections of the goblet which contain resin. Finally, let's reapply finishing oil onto the carved section to match the style of the rest of the goblet. And there you have it. That concludes our epic transformation. A once regular tree root is now the spectacular Goblet of Fire. We're sure that even J.K. Rowling herself would be impressed. Thank you for watching.